5 years after being estranged from my father, he recently reached out to me, which made me reflect on whether I did the right thing when we last parted ways. I was 26, just out of college, when my dad suddenly kicked me out of the house. This happened after my stepmother and stepsister accused me of stealing my stepsister's college savings. This event was the final straw in a long period of tension that began when my dad remarried. My parents had divorced when I was 7, and by the time I was 15, my dad started dating Ellie, who later became my stepmother. Ellie was a widow with a daughter, Sophia, who was 4 years younger than me. From the first time we met, I felt that Ellie and Sophia didn't really want to accept me. Over time, that feeling only grew. When I moved away for college, coming home became uncomfortable, as Ellie and Sophia's cold behavior toward me was obvious. My father, however, didn't see it and believed they had no hard feelings toward me, which only created a bigger gap between us. After graduating, I moved back home to save money for my own place. I wanted to talk to my dad about the tension I was feeling, but he brushed off my concerns, convinced that Ellie and Sophia liked me. It wasn't long before things got worse. One day, after I had been house hunting to get away from the negative atmosphere at home, I came back to a tense situation. My father, visibly upset, immediately told me to leave, accusing me of stealing Sophia's college fund. Ellie backed him up, falsely claiming that I had misused a financial account meant for emergencies. I was shocked and hurt by the accusations, especially because my dad believed them without hearing my side of the story. With no choice, I left, cutting off ties with him. Now, after years of silence, my father's sudden attempt to reconnect has brought back all these painful memories. It's made me wonder if I could have handled the situation differently, but I still don't understand why Ellie accused me of taking money meant for her daughter. Ellie claimed that I had spent a lot of money on expensive brands, using the cash set aside for her daughter to fund a shopping spree. This was a complete lie, but she managed to convince my father by hiding those purchased items in my room. When my father found the stash under my bed, he believed her accusations. Even though I insisted we check with the bank to clear things up, my father refused. Already convinced that I was guilty, he called me a thief, and despite all my efforts to prove I was innocent, he wouldn't listen. Heartbroken, I moved out, lost contact with him, and faced financial struggles for a while. Eventually, I got back on my feet, built a stable life, and even planned to buy a house. For 5 years, I stayed away from my father's side of the family. During that time, my mother stood by me, having also cut ties with my dad because of how he treated me. Then, unexpectedly, my father showed up at my new home, asking for forgiveness. He had finally learned the truth. Ellie had made up the entire story to cover up her own misuse of the money meant for her daughter's college fund. She had bought luxury items for herself and Sophia, then framed me to make my dad cover the expenses, fearing he would see her as a gold digger. After a recent argument with her parents, they revealed everything to my father, exposing Ellie's manipulation. Now understanding the full extent of her lies, my father was asking for a chance to make things right. It turned out that Ellie had been using me as part of her plan to secure her financial future without revealing her own extravagant spending. My father also told me that he had filed for divorce from Ellie with the help of his old lawyer a few weeks ago, and he now wanted to repair our relationship. During our conversation, he mentioned that one of my friend's fathers was a well-respected divorce attorney. My dad hoped I would help him connect with this attorney and maybe get a reduced fee since Ellie and her lawyer had filed a very unfair divorce petition. He seemed to think that just apologizing would make everything fine, and then I would help him as if nothing had happened between us. His audacity left me speechless. I couldn't help but laugh before firmly closing the door on him. The idea that after everything, he would expect me to assist him was ridiculous. If he needed a lawyer, he should contact one himself and pay like everyone else. His current lawyer's hesitation to handle the messy divorce because of complications and retirement was not my problem. After I shut the door on my father, I warned him to leave or I'd call the police. I thought that was the end of it, but then my mother called. To my surprise, she criticized my decision not to help him. She argued that everyone makes mistakes, even my father, and it wasn't fair to hold him to a higher standard just because he was my dad. While I understood her point that people make mistakes, my issue went deeper than that. It was about his choice to trust Ellie over me, his own daughter, and the hurtful things he had said when he kicked me out of the house. Even after all that, he didn't just come to apologize, he also came because he wanted my help. I couldn't help but feel that if he hadn't needed something, I wouldn't have heard from him at all. It took him 5 years to admit his mistake, and now he wanted to make amends, but only because he needed a favor. I tried to explain this to my mother, that my hesitation wasn't about holding on to past mistakes but about the pain caused by him prioritizing Ellie over me. However, my mother insisted that his delayed apology should still count for something and urged me to forgive him and be the bigger person. While I'm close to my friend and could probably talk to him about his father taking on my dad's case, I felt torn. Reconnecting under these circumstances felt emotionally draining, and I wasn't sure I could just set aside the past, especially with the expectation to help him. My mother and I ended up in a heated argument about whether I should help my father get a discount from a top divorce lawyer. Good lawyers are expensive, and I wasn't sure I could even convince anyone to lower their fees. My mother didn't see my perspective, and I couldn't understand hers, which seemed completely illogical to me. The argument left us both frustrated and not speaking to each other. It made me question my decisions and wonder if maybe I was wrong. After reflecting on the situation, I still felt unsure if refusing to help my father was the right decision, but my mother's reaction made me doubt myself. After thinking it over and hearing advice from others, I've decided to distance myself from both of my parents. It's clear to me that I don't owe my father anything, especially since his apology came only after he realized the truth, suggesting he wouldn't have reached out if he didn't need help. As for my mother, I'm confused by her sudden support for my father after years of not speaking to him. During our last conversation, she mentioned that my father had contacted her, tearfully trying to reconnect, something very out of character for him, since he rarely shows his emotions. After hearing my father's tearful plea, my mother agreed to listen to him and learned about his attempt to apologize to me. However, she claimed they hadn't been in contact for the past 5 years, which I found hard to believe. This made me realize that my mother doesn't understand me as well as I thought. If she truly knew me, she wouldn't have expected me to forgive my father so easily. For now, I've decided to distance myself from both my parents. It's been easy to avoid my father since I've been doing it for years. But creating space from my mother will be much harder. She's been my main family connection, and the thought of losing that bond is painful. I decided to give her a week to reflect and possibly apologize for her reaction. If she doesn't, I'll have to accept that my relationship with her may also be a casualty of this family conflict. It's a tough decision, but I need to protect my emotional well-being and move forward, with or without their understanding. Before the week ended, my mother reached out, not with an apology, but with a request to visit and talk things through in person, hoping for reconciliation. I agreed. When she arrived, she began by admitting she might not have fully tried to understand my perspective during our last conversation. Encouraged, I shared my feelings again, hoping it would lead to her apology so we could move forward. However, instead of apologizing, she suggested I have the same conversation with my father. She believed that if I calmly explained my side to him, it might help heal things between us. She reminded me that despite his mistakes in believing I had taken Ellie's money, my father had still protected me from legal consequences, which in her view showed that he cared. She pressed me to offer him an explanation, saying that I was raised to be kind and understanding. I felt disheartened. I told her that she didn't know me as well as she thought. I didn't feel any obligation to forgive or explain anything to my father after all he had done. I was also hurt that she hadn't apologized for her own role in this situation and told her I would only be willing to talk again if she was ready to give a genuine apology. As the conversation grew more tense, she became visibly nervous and admitted that she couldn't leave without trying to fulfill a promise she made to my father, to convince me to speak to him. She pleaded with me, saying that family should forgive one another and that it would be tragic to live without that connection. I dismissed this as empty words and asked her to leave, frustrated that her visit seemed more about her promise to my father than about repairing our relationship. In that moment, she finally showed some regret, realizing that her approach could cause her to lose me. However, her apology felt tied to her loyalty to my father, rather than a sincere understanding of my feelings. This revelation only added to the complexity of the situation. leaving me to navigate the turbulent family dynamics while trying to protect my emotional health. I felt deeply betrayed by both of my parents, yet a part of me wondered if I should forgive them simply because they were my parents. They had done many good things in the past, and perhaps that should count for something. However, when my mother used this reasoning to justify her actions, it seemed absurd to me. I confronted her about making promises to my father that she might not be able to keep, stressing that it wasn't my job to help her fulfill those commitments. The conversation escalated when she admitted that my father was waiting outside in the car, hoping to be invited in. That was the final straw. I had made it clear that I didn't want to see him, yet she had disregarded my wishes, thinking she could convince me otherwise. My frustration turned into anger, and I couldn't hold back. I yelled at her, telling her she was a terrible mother and that I was done with her. Despite her tears and apologies, I had made up my mind. The argument dragged on for about 15 minutes before she finally left, and as she did, I warned her that if either she or my father returned, I would call the police. After she left, I even considered speaking to a lawyer about getting a protective order against them. Then, out of nowhere, another unexpected event occurred. I was enjoying a day off at home, planning a quiet day, when Ellie and her daughter Sophia showed up at my doorstep. At first, I was ready to send them away immediately, and I even started dialing the police. But Ellie quickly interjected, saying she wasn't there to cause trouble but to reveal some truths about my father and explain why my mother had suddenly sided with him after years of silence. Her presence was as unpleasant as ever, and I had no desire to hear her out, but something she said about my mother caught my attention, and I reluctantly decided to listen, though I kept her outside and refused to let her in. Ellie revealed that a few weeks ago, her parents had told my father some critical information about the incident from 5 years ago, which had triggered a series of revelations and confrontations. This twist was surprising. I never expected Ellie, of all people, to come forward with information that could potentially explain the recent tensions and strange alliances in my family. Her news complicated my understanding of the family dynamics. Ellie explained that she had stopped sending money to her parents because my father was no longer giving her the financial support she wanted. She had grown greedy, and when the money started to dry up, she began investigating. That's when she uncovered a shocking secret. My father was having an affair with my mother. Ellie suspected he had been hiding money, possibly preparing to leave her. Determined not to be left empty-handed, Ellie had decided to stay with him for now, planning to file for divorce on her own terms eventually.